Most of Week 2 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday night with a game between the Bills and Dolphins. Despite it only being Week 2, this game had serious implications because of what it would mean for the AFC East division at the end of the season. Buffalo would go on to win 31-10, and they looked really good in this game. The Bills have started the year with back-to-back 31-plus point games, with Josh Allen throwing for just 371 total yards in those games. And I think that can only be viewed as a positive because he hasn't had to play hero ball the way he has in the past, and they're 2-0. James Cook had a career night as he had 95 total yards and 3 touchdowns, and Buffalo's defense looked great in this after a slow start in Week 1. Buffalo has forced 4 turnovers in 2 games, and they look like a real force. For Miami, they didn't look good in this game pre-Tua injury, and the pick 6 was how this game went in one play. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle combined for 65 yards in this game, and the Dolphins' offense, outside of Devon Achane, never got going. The clock management specifically in the first half was terrible, and I thought the play calling was also suspect. This was a nightmare of a game for Miami all the way around. And for Tua, with his history, I would imagine we all feel the same way, but it has been reported he has no plans to retire. I wish the best for Tua with his decision and with whatever his future entails, and I'd like to give a special shout out to the Bills Mafia for raising money for Tua's foundation during this time. To land over for Giants Commanders, and I know people like to dunk on Daniel Jones and crack jokes about his $160 million contract, but he was far from the problem in this game. The Giants scored 3 touchdowns on the road and gave up 0 touchdowns and still lost. They also averaged nearly 6 yards per carry as an offense, and this loss can only be described in one word, and that's frustrating. I don't know what to say about this team moving forward. They're clearly not going to win 12 games, but even in games they should win, they lose. Also, Malik Neighbors is going to be a problem for a long time, and to the people who were concerned about drafting him in fantasy, you shouldn't have been. He's a monster. Jaden Daniels looked comfortable in this game, and to be honest, I don't care how many games Washington wins this year, because it's about developing your young quarterback. The ground game was extremely impressive for the Commanders in Week 2, and I hope we get a few good years of Jaden and Brian Robinson, because they are a very fun duo. For it only being Week 2, I think Jaden looks really good for a rookie quarterback in a not great situation. Up several hundred miles on I-95 for Seahawks Patriots, and this was a huge game for Geno Smith. I am a big Geno believer, and 2023 was very unfortunate for the Seahawks with how many injuries they had, and I was absolutely a believer heading into 2024 that Geno and company could right this ship. He threw for over 325 yards against a solid Patriots defense, and just maybe, we saw a glimpse into the future today with DK Metcalf being the veteran and Jackson Smith-Njigba being the youngster. Both guys had over 115 yards, and this was a pass-centric game for Seattle. The Seahawks are 2-0 in the Mike Macdonald era, and they are going to be a very tough team to beat. For New England, obviously a Super Bowl was not the expectation this year, but this is still a frustrating loss. They had 3rd and 1 on their own 40 in overtime, and if you have 2 tries to get a yard as an NFL offense, I do think you should be able to get a yard when it's do or die, and unfortunately that was pretty much the end of the game. They're a better team than people give credit, and they ran the ball very well against a well-coached defense. New England is no slouch, and I don't think they'll beat the Jets in Week 3, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Speaking of the Jets, I have some concerns with them moving forward. I know they won with a score of 24-17, but boy did Will Levis help them out with an inexcusable red zone mistake. A win is a win, of course, and I'm not saying to not enjoy it, but putting up just 265 yards of offense after you put up just 266 in Week 1 is not going to cut it. They play New England in Week 3 and Denver in Week 4, and I would love for them to put up a decent game offensively to really buy back in with this team. Also, I wish Jermaine Johnson and any other player who was hurt Sunday nothing but the best moving forward. For Tennessee, I really think Calvin Ridley is one of the more underrated players in the NFL. I love the signing from the minute it was made because it actually gave Will Levis a chance, unlike 2023. But I have a lot of concerns with Will Levis moving forward because the plays everyone knows he should not make happen at least once, if not twice a game, and you can legitimately make a case. The Titans are 2-0 without the underhand pick 6 in Week 1 and with a couple of plays in Week 2, and I don't know if that's ever going to leave his game. This team has allowed 413 total yards in 2 games, and they're 0-2. I know it's cliche to say, well, if they clean up a couple of things, but the Titans are a good team, but they continuously shoot themselves in the foot. They could and should be 2-0. Chargers-Panthers time, and the Chargers part is easy. They've outscored their opponents 48-13 in 2 games, and the Jim Harbaugh era is off to a terrific start. I never thought the talent on the Chargers roster was a problem, rather that it was a culture problem. The Chargers having 2 relatively stress-free wins to start the year is definitely not something Chargers fans are used to, but it's a welcomed change. The J.K. Dobbins revenge tour continued in Week 2, and I was ecstatic to see Quentin Johnston haul in 2 touchdowns in this game, especially after the rookie year he had. The Chargers' next 2 games are against the Steelers and Chiefs, and they will be ones I am very much paying attention to. For Carolina, guys, it's not looking good. Carolina has been outscored 73-13 in the first 2 games of the year, and Bryce Young looks bad. The one rollout to the backside in particular was terrible, as at minimum, he should have thrown the ball away, and I think that summarizes the Bryce Young era. He doesn't look comfortable, he looks like a deer in headlights, and he finished this game with just 84 yards on 26 attempts. He has 245 yards with no passing touchdowns and 3 interceptions this year with a 44.1 passer rating. I really hope I'm wrong, but I think it's over. Now, I was absolutely wrong about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I didn't think there was a chance they would go into Detroit down as many guys as they were and win. No chance. But they did, and Todd Bowles' defense deserves all the credit and praise for this win. Multiple 4th down stops, multiple turnovers, and anytime you can hold the powerful Lions offense to just 16 points, that's a big accomplishment on its own, let alone down several guys in the secondary. Baker has now thrown 39 touchdowns to 13 interceptions since becoming a Buc, including postseason, and they play Denver next week and can very easily be 3-0. I hope to see these teams play again. For the Lions, I think Aiden Hutchinson will win the Defensive Player of the Year. He is an absolute game wrecker, and 5 sacks in a single game is historic. I don't say this often, but I was a little disappointed with Ben Johnson in this game. The Lions ran for nearly 140 yards as an offense and averaged over 5 yards per carry, yet Jared Goff threw the ball 55 times. The sequence at the end of the first half was also bad, but positively it is fixable. The Lions will be fine, but there's no doubt this is a frustrating loss. The New Orleans Saints, on the other hand, have outscored their opponents 91-29 to start the year and have put up back-to-back 44-plus point games. Alvin Kamara looked like the young Alvin Kamara, and if you played him in fantasy, chances are you lost. Alvin had 180 total yards and 4 touchdowns, and he absolutely shredded Mike Zimmer's defense. Clint Kubiak has absolutely transformed this offense from where they were last year, and the struggles with Pete Carmichael look like they are long gone. 35 points in the first half was a statement, and I thought Dallas would beat New Orleans, but the Saints proved me wrong to the tune of a 25-point win, and they play Philly next week in what should be a very good game. For Dallas, this was very reminiscent of the Packers' playoff game, or, the last home game they played prior to this one. The Saints put up a highlight reel against this team, and I don't think I'm going to fully buy into Dallas this year because of games like this. You never know which team you're going to get. A lot of Cowboys fans were back after their Week 1 win in Cleveland, but were punched in the mouth by Derek Carr in Week 2, and they have an 0-2 Baltimore team foaming at the mouth, ready to play them in Week 3. Up 1,000 miles to Minneapolis to discuss 49ers Vikings. Fred Warner is a future Hall of Famer, and he is an animal. He single-handedly kept this game from being a 20-point blowout. He intercepted Darnold deep in 49ers territory, and he punched the ball out of Aaron Jones' hands before Jones could make it a 27-7 game. This game was not that close, but Fred kept the 49ers in the game. San Francisco was just 2 of 10 on 3rd down and turned the ball over twice. I also thought Jordan Mason looked great, but for as dominant as they looked in Week 1, they did not look great in this game at all. For Minnesota, you guys probably know I am a Vikings fan, so after a 2-0 start, I think it's reasonable to say Sam Darnold is leading the Vikings to a Super Bowl. And in all seriousness, this defense is ferocious, and they will be one of the best units in all of football this year. Minnesota should have won by a lot more, and to outscore your opponents in the first 2 weeks 51-23, how can you not get excited? Everyone in this organization is bought in, and you can see it with the energy they play with on Sundays. Heading east to Green Bay, and I want to sincerely congratulate Green Bay for winning this game without Jordan Love and for running the ball down Indy's throat the way they did. Malik Willis only threw the ball 14 times, and I was worried if he had a bad turnover early that Indy could jump out to a lead and force them to play from behind, but it never happened. Games like this are why they paid Josh Jacobs, as he had 32 carries for 151 tough yards in Week 2. The Packers ran the ball for over 250 yards and basically said, "We are running the ball right at you, try and stop us," all game long. They were the more physical team, the more gritty team, and they came away with a hard-fought win. For Indy, they've now allowed over 210 yards rushing in back-to-back weeks, and you obviously knew what the Packers' game plan was heading into this game, and that's a significant problem to say the least. There's a lot more concern with this team moving forward, and the offense certainly wasn't good in this game either, but this was as much of a blowout as a 16-10 game can be as you're ever going to see. Indy's rushing defense has been historically bad through the first two games, and we'll break down the Colts more in videos throughout the week, but this team is far too talented to be 0-2 and to look as bad as they have. To the Sunshine State for Browns-Jags, and this is a classic case of a win is a win. Cleveland was just 2 of 14 on third down, they had just 297 yards of offense, committed 13 penalties, and Deshaun threw for just 186 yards, yet they won the game. I was very excited for the Browns defense heading into the year, and this game is a perfect example why. They held Trevor Lawrence to a less than 50% completion percentage, and really outside of two plays, which was the big Lawrence run and the big play to Brian Thomas Jr., their defense was great. The drops in offense were certainly frustrating for Cleveland, as were the penalties, but with the past week the Browns had, they will gladly take a win. For the Jags, being 0-2 obviously stinks, but it especially stinks with how their games have been played. I love the Doug Peterson hire a few years ago, but he's not the same coach he was during the back half of the 22 season and the coach that helped win this team a playoff game. The Jags have a lot of problems, and not having a legit receiver for Trevor to throw to, outside of Brian Thomas Jr., is the tip of the iceberg. The Jags' next two games are at Buffalo and at Houston, and there's a very real chance this team starts 0-4. Raiders-Ravens time, and I'll be honest, when Derrick Henry scored a touchdown to make it 23-13, I thought the Raiders were done. This was in a game where they clearly could not run the football as they averaged just 1.6 yards per carry, and I thought it was a classic case of the Ravens beating a lesser opponent. But the Raiders never stopped fighting, and I know you can easily make a case and say, well, the Ravens had 11 penalties and had over 120 more yards, but a win's a win. And I do think Brock Bowers could be a top 5 tight end by the end of the season and maybe even higher. He is a truly great player, and I think it's pretty simple. Just feed him and Devontae the football and go from there. Incredible win for the Raiders, who should improve to 2-1 as they play Carolina next week. For Baltimore, 0-2 is brutal. There's no way around it. The 2nd and 19 draw call with 3 minutes to play while the game was tied was also really bad. This was such a preventable loss for Baltimore, and their schedule is brutal moving forward as they play in Dallas, home against the Bills, and at Cincinnati in their next 3 games. I am a big Baltimore believer, but this is an extremely tough loss to stomach. The Rams are now 0-2, and this situation looks bad, as in very bad. They lost by 31 points to a division rival, they were down 34-3 at one point, they averaged just 2.7 yards per carry, and they have been hampered by injury. The Rams have been outscored 67-30 to start the year, and the Cardinals had nearly 500 yards of offense. Whatever the Cardinals wanted to do in week 2, they did. The Rams making any sort of noise was always going to rely on them staying relatively healthy, as they are more of a top-heavy roster, and they're nowhere close to healthy, nor do they look anything like a playoff team. They play San Fran next week, and I would be shocked if they're not 0-3. For Arizona, I am glad Marvin Harrison Jr. is officially not a bust after his one-catch, 4-yard Week 1 performance, and I gotta be honest, I was worried there for a second. And all jokes aside, this was as complete of a game as you could have asked for. I don't know any Cardinals game in the past few years that would come even close to this. Marvin had 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, they ran for 230 yards as an offense, and they absolutely destroyed a division rival. They only lost by 6 to Buffalo, and they will be a feisty team against Detroit next week. To the Mile High City for Steelers-Broncos, and if you didn't expect anything but a 13-6 Steelers win where both teams have less than 300 yards, then you weren't ready for Steelers-Broncos. As expected, this was a defensive slugfest, and the big thing for the Steelers was they protected the football. And from a bigger perspective, the Steelers are 2-0 with 2 road wins to start the year, which isn't something a lot of teams can say, not just in 2024, but for any NFL season. The flags were abundant in this game, and I would say Justin Fields played about as well as you would expect Justin Fields to play, but if you are a Steelers fan, you have given up 16 total points in the first 2 weeks, and you're 2-0, and that's all that matters. For Denver, we knew what the expectations were entering the year, but I think they've disappointed through 2 games. Bo Nix has been the leading rusher in both games so far, and he led the team in rushing in week 2 with 25 yards. Without Bo Nix, the Broncos players had 15 carries for 39 yards, which is awful. Greg Dulcich had not just one, but 2 drops, and obviously that doesn't help your rookie quarterback, but this offense is bad, and it's not fair to place this entirely on Bo Nix, but I do worry about this team ruining their rookie quarterback before he ever gets a chance. The Chiefs defeated the Bengals with a score of 26-25, and Kansas City is now 2-0 with wins over the Ravens and Bengals. This game was anything but an easy or pretty win for Kansas City, but a win over the Bengals is a win nonetheless. You know, you could be playing this team in January, and if you can play them in Kansas City, Burrowhead, it's better than having to go to Cincinnati to play them. I don't think there's much to take away for Kansas City other than to clean up the negative plays, and they know that, but this is an elite team, and they're probably going to make another deep run this year. Cincinnati has now fallen to 1-11 in the first 2 games of the Zach Taylor era, and this was a tough loss. They won the turnover battle 3-1, they held Patrick Mahomes to 151 yards passing, and he even threw 2 interceptions, and they left Kansas City with a loss. Losing obviously sucks, but what I think the worst part for Cincinnati moving forward is there's a 2-game difference between them and Kansas City, and for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, like Cincinnati does, this could be fatal when they have to play multiple road games just to get back to the Super Bowl. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 31% of people watching are subscribed, and helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.